Good morning, good evening, and good night, Galaxy. I am your host, JohnyChainsaw, joined by my co-host, AZ Potato 68. And today's episode, we have a very special guest. His name is Inchoate. He's from server 34. He is currently a level 49. So he's going to be able to give us a lot of insights on what we as most players can expect to see at a higher level. He's going to have a lot of good insights on dark space, different ships that we'll be seeing in the future, hostile grinding, and most importantly, what kind of resource requirements we're going to be seeing in the future for station upgrades. So I just want to say thank you for joining us. And if you want to just tell the galaxy a little bit about possibly are you a huge Star Trek fan and why did you download this game?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I go by Inchoate. A lot of people just call me Inco. This is my first account, first server, only server. I don't play alts or anything like that. It's kind of coincidental finding the game. Didn't specifically know anything about it. Was just the old, I got to find something else to play. Little did I know I'd find the quickest way to set your Amex on fire. But found it always, I grew up watching Star Trek, like The Next Generation was kind of my generation. So always was a fan of it, and just started playing and kind of just fell in love with the early play. And now I'm kind of bought in, obviously, hook, line, and sinker, and now I'm in it for the late play.
It's great to have you here, by the way, Inchoate. And I'm going to call you Inch.
That's fine.
Just for short, and I know not everybody does that, but why not? So glad to have you on, right? And I've progressed on the server we're on server 22 with me and JohnyChainsaw, and I'm the strongest player there at level 41. And there are a couple of people who are 42, but I've done some more research and blah, blah, blah. But you and I happen to also be on another server together where I do have an alternate account. And you far surpass what I've done. And that's why I thought it was important and reached out to you and asked you to join us on this to talk about what's it like once we got past level 40 to get to level 49, right? And you're quickly approaching level 50, right, to the sort of end game, if you will, without an end game. And we want to talk about what that experience is like for you and maybe some advice you'd have for somebody who's level 18 or somebody who's level 28 or somebody who's level 38 and what you've been through up to this point and your recommendations and strategies and how to progress in the game to get the most out of it. So really happy to have you on.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, so I think, just for a little comparison for different levels that we're at. So I'm currently at level 33. I'm currently building ops for level 34. Potato is level 41, and you're level. So my current upgrade, that's my big Parstale requirement, is going to be Academy for level 34. I'm looking at around 120 million Parstale. Now, Potato, what are you looking at for your next upgrade in Parstale?
My next the next biggest upgrade for me really is about 6.4 billion in Parsteel, and that's to upgrade the hangar. But I suspect compared to Inchoate, I'm not even close. I'm not even in the realm of what he's dealing with. So do you want to talk about that a little bit, Inch?
Yeah, so just generally speaking, all the upgrades, and 49 to 50 is far and away the most painful upgrade going through them all. You know how they kind of meter out. So, you get into the 39 range, and then all of a sudden, to get up to 39, you have to upgrade all your docks and your defense guns, right?
Right.
But you can leave certain things low down in the mid 30s, and it doesn't really matter. Going 49 to 50, you essentially have to upgrade every freaking thing in your base up to level 49. So for example, I can't upgrade my dock from 48 to 49 until I've upgraded my scrapyard to level 49. So they're all intertwined. Most of the upgrades range somewhere between the 60 to 80 billion par steel per upgrade.
Oh my God.
Wow.
I think everybody's heart just skipped a beat right now hearing you say that. So you just mentioned your scrapyard. What are you looking at from just that next upgrade from level 47 to 48 scrapyard?
So that scrapyard's 61.2 billion steel and just 600 million trit, and a handful of crystal, garbage that nobody cares about anymore.
Did you just use you just use the phrase and just 600 million titanium?
Well, there's a reason. I used to be the #1 resources rated on my server for a long time, and once I got into the 41, 42 range, I stopped raiding because it's pointless. How am I going to raid 60 billion RSS off of something? You're not. So it's basically a waste of time.
And I think you bring up a great question. So do you think that there's anything that Scopely can do to make being able to level up at the very high levels attainable or possible for everyone? Where do you think the shift in the game would have to happen?
The big shift comes in your resource management at the upper 30 levels. Upper 30 and lower, and the lower and 40 into maybe 41, you can still functionally raid to some degree. By the time you're 40, 41, you really start realizing that you either do it for fun, but you don't really expect to get much out of it. So if they actually want to make it possible for players that are either free to play or minimal investment to get to 40 and beyond, the rating system that we know it would either have to be changed to some degree. The other possibility would be making mining changes at higher levels up in deep space, et cetera. For example, the G4 miners, I'll be the first to tell you, are not very impressive.
Now,
Yeah, I would agree with you. So I've got a Hydra at T4, and my Antares can mine faster still, even though the Hydra can reach spaces that have those 400K nodes, right, in 105 or 110 warp space, which maybe it expands beyond that I haven't seen yet.
Yeah, they do.
But even rating, to your point, it is there's not that many players that have 5 billion in something available to be rated, and they're good at shielding by that point. But even if you can, right, you can raid with a big faction miner, you can do like 1 billion an hour. But you want to raid 10 billion? That's 10 hours of constant raiding, assuming the person doesn't come back online after you've cracked their base, right? Which 10 hours is kind of a ridiculous expectation for them to not notice at that point, at that level.
But absolutely agreed. #1, your number of targets is significantly decreased. So just finding somebody, and as to your point, players that are higher level generally have better shield discipline. For example, you'll never see me unshielded. If I attack, I'm reshielding within about 5 minutes.
Now, let me ask you a question. What is your station defense right now at level 49? And so it's a multiple part question. What is your station defense? Have you ever been raided? And then on top of that, do you think there's anybody on your server who could raid you if they wanted?
Sure. So right now, sitting with just 2 ships in base, I'm at 225 million station power. It's a little over 200 million empty. And that's with level 48 guns, which once you get to 48, you have 6.
Wow.
So that's generally where it sits. I was probably rated once back when I was in the 20s or so, and that would have been the prototypical I fell asleep playing and woke up to the phone dinging.
Let me ask you a question.
Ben,
When it comes to rating for you, though, what is your strongest ship, and what's probably the largest base you could one-shot if you wanted?
Strongest ship currently is the Kelvin, right at about 10 million power. Kelvin's not bad at cracking. My Jelly is about 9 million power. I think it's a little bit better at cracking. Just the shield works a little bit better. I can probably one-shot somebody into their mid-30s or the higher 30s, depending on what they have in base.
So if you did go that route and you're like, okay, I'm going to go try to hit this station with my Kelvin, and you can't one-shot it, what are you looking at for repair costs for your Kelvin, and what tier are you currently sitting at?
This is another interesting change in the game. Once you get to the G4 ships, my Kelvin is currently a tier 7, and the repair costs between the Jelly, which I thought were high when I first got a Jelly, which those run like 16 million, or was it 16 million trit and a couple million dilly.
No, early on it was like 5 million trit, right? I mean, when you're like talking about tier 5 or tier 6.
Yeah, mine's tier 10.
Yeah.
So once you get to the G4 ships, faction ships, there is a bit of a jump. So for example, to 100% hull repair my Kelvin is about 360 million trit and 16 million dilly.
360 million tritanium for one repair?
For one repair, and that's with 100% faction cost decrease research done.
Wow.
Now, you mentioned faction research. What are you looking at right now just for your research requirement costs? Have you more or less maxed out all your research at this point, or do you still have that one thing that you haven't maxed and you're just like, I don't ever want to spend this?
Well, I mean, you kind of move just as the way the game does, just to keep you sucked in. Obviously, there are certain research aspects where you have to get something that you don't want to get the thing that you want, right? They're all interconnected.
Yep.
Most of the research, and there's plenty of research that I haven't done. Obviously it's towards the end of some of the things. But for example, most of the research stuff, for example, my next level of, tier 4 interceptor critical resist, that's 400 million dilly. So, and there are research facets that the most I've paid in a research for one level of something is like 1.2 or 1.3 billion dilly.
Wow. Now, as comparison, potato.
You mined that pretty quickly, right? It was like a day or two mining to just knock that out.
That's one of the things, just to go back a step, what we were talking about when we were talking about the G4 faction miners. So before I got any of the G4 faction miners, I had all the G3 faction miners all at max tier 9. The break-even point for when those miners become as effective is around tier 6. So you have to research them all the way up to tier 6 just to have something that is comparable in mining, to still have around 3 million cargo space. So just to make it equal, it has a slightly higher power number, but I'll tell you now that my faction G4 faction miners with a power of 1.5 to 2 million, still any attack ship that's 1 point anything million can still absolutely destroy it, no questions asked.
No, so that's a really good point, right? As people are building up and they're starting to get, when you get into those kind of mid-30s and you start capping out multiple factions, and you have access to more than one faction survey ship, those are critical ships, right? And it's a long way before you like get into the G4 faction miners.
Correct.
And progress them to a point where they become effective. So maybe a point taken out of this, Johnny and Inch, is don't disregard the G3 faction miners. They're important, right? And they carry you a long way through the game.
Absolutely.
Until you're at a point where you're gaining so much resources that you can upgrade your G4 miners. But those G3 miners, those faction miners are really, really important, and they're very powerful, right, when it comes to mining.
Absolutely.
Rates.
So, for example, because I have the Fed and the Rami G4 miners. I do not have the Klingon one yet. I'm still grinding out those blueprints because I'm going primarily Federation for my current faction grind. I still use the Cavort every day. I do mine it in deep space because once you get to up the main mission line, I believe it's level 42 or 44, you can max out your plus 25 warp capability on every miner ship. So my Cavort just alone has 95 warp, so I can mine it in the mid portion of deep space where they have the 100,000 nodes. And then I still use my other.
Aren't those like 400,000 nodes when you get into 110 space? 105 or 110 space. I think they're like 400,000 nodes.
400,000 nodes start at warp 120, and then the 2.4 million nodes are at 160.
Okay. All right.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah, but you're right. I think you have a point of once you start getting or grabbing on to those G3 miners, the faction miners, and you really get them developed into tier 9 especially, right? Once you max those out, they have a range where you don't have to relocate your base in order to go mine G4, and you start to get some bigger nodes out there that stack up some G4 so you can start refining more. But the refinery is still limiting early on in the 40s, right? You don't, at level 40, you only get
uncommon, I believe, then.
Uncommon, yeah, and you start to get, you get uncommon at like level 41, and you start to see some rare at 42 or 43. But early on, it's a pretty small amount, right? Comparable to how much you have to mine per box.
Because they start, just like everything else, they do the tiered refinery rates, and I know there's a bunch of argument of does it really help you to do 3 boxes rather than do 2? That's another debate. But your first refine, I forget, was what, like 40,000, and then to do 2 chests is 250,000, and to do 3 is 1 million. So that incremental increase.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, the keeping your miners, and I agree with you, getting the G3 miners is important. Because, for example, during mining events, I've got 6 ship slots, so I'm running 5 miners. So I'm using my 2 G4s and 3 G3s and mining with everybody. And I still have a combat ship.
Now, let me ask you a question from a social or, in-game political aspect. Are you able to mine as much as you want in deep space on your server and not have to worry about anybody hitting you over protection, or do you still have to worry about that?
For the most part, you don't have to worry about it, first and foremost, because there's only one player on my server who's not in my alliance who can mine out in warp 120.
Is that Stink who's at that level?
Yeah,
or
Stinky
no?
can get out here, but he's a good dude. We did have I call him a rival group if you want, who basically had 4 or 5 players break off of a rival alliance, and their sole goal was to kill our alliance. So they quote unquote went to war with us and made all of us KOS for no reason whatsoever. And one of their players burned up their Amex just to get their jelly out to 120 just to be able to hit us. So that's now gone by the wayside, but generally speaking, there are so few people out there that it's kind of like the old Warp 40 ranges were I'm sure you guys' server was the same, where it used to be a, mutually, beneficial. We're all going to mine and not kill anybody. And then as more people get out there, now that went by the wayside. But deep space still is, for all intents and purposes, communal ceasefire.
So
same on our server, right? And for us, when we talk about Warp 75 plus, there's 10 players who are at Warp 75 plus. So they in general mutually agreed as individuals not to hit each other, because there's nodes available and why bother, and it's a 15-minute ride either way.
Right.
So why do it?
And that's basically the way I think it is on most servers, and it is on ours. The other thing that's also interesting is that once you get up into the level 40 range, believe it or not, unlike in the 30s where your rate limiting resource always tends to be your minerals, once you get above 40, minerals actually become very unimportant. And now it becomes your actual mats, like your tritanium, your par steel. That's your rate limiting factor rather than your minerals. I have a few million refined G4 Epic. It just sits there. Don't use it much. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't need it yet. Yeah, till you get into those next ships, right? Or the higher tier next level ships.
The higher tiers is where it comes into play, but still, it's actually relatively low if you look percentage wise. Those massive jumps in resource requirements, for whatever reason, Scopely put that for ships. It's actually your ship parts. It's all ship parts.
So I definitely want to get it.
I found that personally that the uncommon ship parts are the limiting factor for me on G4 ships.
Absolutely.
Personally.
Now, can you buy those uncommon ship parts with Latinum, or is that not a possibility?
Nope. Green and above, you cannot.
And for those players out there who are not familiar with Dark Space, can you kind of explain to them how do you get those uncommon ship parts?
It's simply destroying ships of higher level. So I believe it's level 40 ships and above start giving you broken ship parts, and then naturally you have a whole nother refinery for it. So you get to refine your frickin' ship parts. And the refinery for ship parts is just as bad and just as bad union workers as the one for your minerals.
So Inchoate, when you and I talked early on, a week or so ago, about you doing this podcast with us, you kind of indicated, like, I'll do it, but I'm a little disgruntled. Yeah. What was that about? What were you? What disgruntles you about the game at level 49?
I think the biggest change was when they released the additional levels, of 40 through 50. I think number one, the planning that went into it was relatively poor because it vastly altered gameplay. So like I mentioned before, I used to love raiding a lot, but now there's no point. That was a big facet of the game I played. I loved to raid, and it was helpful to raid. Now it's a waste of time. What am I going to go do? Throw a 360 million repair bill for one hull when I'm not going to raid that much? The math doesn't even work. It costs me more to raid than I get from raiding.
Yep.
So is that a game design thing, or do you think it's a matter of we don't have enough players with poor shield management at level 46 and above?
Yeah.
And will it come eventually, or is it sort of a just
the way design? That it's built currently, you'll never get there, because the only ones that will get into the 40s under the current game mechanics and the current resource management are going to be those players that invest a significant amount of real life money into the game. Those people are going to have a bigger stake in things. They're going to be the more experienced players with a better shield management anyway. And still, like we've pointed out, I have a fairly, large group of ships to choose from. If I had, say, somebody who was 44 and had the normal resources that a 44 had, it still would, like we pointed out earlier, take me hours upon hours to raid anything that I would consider a reasonable return on investment. So why would I do that when I have other things that I'm doing in the game? Like basically right now, this is my grinding.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk about hostile grinding right now, but I also, before we get to that, because we were on the topic of dark space.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is there any areas of dark space that you have not unlocked yet?
No, I've gone and mapped out everything in the, I don't know, we call it universe. But you have to have 185 warp to see the very far corners.
Now, I've seen a video of a Borg.
What?
Yep.
So hold on, Johnny. Just what kind of ship gets to 185? Right. So I personally, I'm at level 41. I got a Hydra, and I got a ISS Jelly, right? A heli. And neither of them can get to 120 yet. So what's it take really to get out to 185
you
where
can
you're
get to
at?
with a tier 7 uncommon faction warship, as long as you have the plus 25 warp research done.
And the warp research unlocks. I saw a +5 or a +10
It's
warp
+5.
research.
It's +5, and there are 5 levels.
I think I can get 42.
Yeah, you have to get up to, again, you have to get these the stupid shard in order to start doing that, and that comes through the main mission line. I forget which one, but that's where you have the ability to start that research. And those are actually some of the pricey ones too, at about $1 billion dilly per.
Well, that's nothing. I mean, $1 billion.
Now, I know
whatever.
I've seen a video in dark space about a Borg cube that's in dark space. Have you encountered that Borg cube? And I think the video I saw showed it at about 230 million in power. Now, have you seen it yet?
It's, as memory serves, it's somewhere out in the top northeastern section. I can't remember if that is through because it's somewhere that I saw the video as well. I've viewed all the systems, but to be honest, I can't remember if I saw it or not. Most of the time, like going to those furthest points, like out in warp 185 and whatnot, I was basically exploring the map, seeing if there's any resources out there, like for example, the tribble mining area that's in the Klingon section. Like, is there something else cute, like at 185 or something? But at 230 million, from what I hear, it's a yellow ship. No shot. Nobody will ever hit it.
Now, have you been disappointed with what you've seen in that warp 185 range?
The biggest problem, a lot of it is unfinished. So from the level 46 zones up to the level 4950 zones, a lot of them are actually unfinished. So you'll have no hostiles in there, or they're very cookie cutter as far as the resources that are there. Most of the resources up in deep space, there is a central area that has your minerals, and then there's a spoke construct, so like 6 zones around it that have hospitable base areas, and they're very cookie cutter. There's not a lot of ingenuity that's gone into it. The biggest problem also about deep space is the horrific travel times. So for example, in order to, if I have my base in deep space, like at warp 120, if I want to send one of my G4 faction miners out to go mine, it actually takes me longer to send that ship out from warp 120 than it does if I'm sitting down in regular, lower Klingon space or something like that. It actually takes longer because those pathways take such significant increase in warp times.
Wow.
Yeah, I would agree. I've got a base sitting in Wesen right now, as an example, right, and off of Kepler. So I've got a base sitting in Wesen, and if I want to send a faction miner, a G4 faction miner, up to 110, 105 or 110 faction space for G4 mining, where the 400,000 nodes are, it's a 18-minute ride, right?
Yep.
Each way, just to get there. And where you're at, when you talk about the deep space level that you're in, which is way beyond where I'm at, I can't even imagine, right? You're talking about 30 minutes or 35 minutes or 40 minutes.
Well, and all mine,
Or
so I have
talking about
max warp research as well. So I'm at 100% increase in warp speed for every ship. And even with that, I'm in the low 20s as far as distance or time to get a miner out there. So
let me ask you now a little bit about faction space, hostile grinding. Now, I'm going to assume that you've maxed rep on all your Klingon, Federation, and Ron. Are there any of those three that you're focusing on? And what level hostiles are you hitting? And are you trying to get any of those next level ships?
Right. So by maxed, I assume you mean locked at the 10
Locked,
million.
yep. 10 million, yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I'm not talking about the billion it takes to max them, yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah, all my factions were locked before they released the expansion. And I actually didn't faction grind for the first couple of months of the expansion because of the talk of re-implementing the locks. So I basically did nothing because, as anybody who's finally locked a faction knows, going back to getting tails when you go into a system is a royal pain. So I wanted to keep all those, in the positive. So after those couple of months, once they re-implemented the locks, because I went Romulan the first release, I decided I'll go Federation this one just for fun, no real reason. So I did. I really haven't run the missions because obviously, again, taking away from other factions, I didn't want to do. And if you dual grind, you can get both faction miners, which again, I think faction miners are very important regardless of how functional they are. Having something that is not a great ship and not being very functional is worse than having a good ship that's still not very functional, at least in my opinion. So I've been able to get the Federation rep up to about 350 or 360 million, which gives you about 80 to 90 million of Romulan rep, and then Klingon is stuck at the 10 mil lock. And I've done all of that through grinding.
Now, what level hostiles are you hitting in order to get that kind of wrap up to those numbers?
So for a long time, I had grinded the veteran surveys, the veteran transports that give you additional rep for relatively low level. So they're level 38 to 40, and the ship strength is around the 4 to 5 million range. I ground those for quite a while just for rep alone. But for the past several months, I'm 100% grinding in Kronos, the level 55 survey ships, and that's
they dropped
exactly. So
they
in
dropped the prints,
doing that,
right?
now they are a little bit tougher, or a lot of bit tougher, I guess. So those ships themselves, while they do drop the 3 blueprints, they drop the G3 miner for the faction, G4 miner, the uncommon, and then the rare combat ships. Those blueprints do drop. General drop rate is about 1 box per 2 enemies, and blueprint drop rate is in the low single digits, and it's random of one of those 4 ships.
But so do you think that changes based on your level? Because I've seen when I go hunt in Kronos or Sol or Romulus, when you hunt those 55 level
survey ships,
hostiles, the drop rate of blueprints is pretty high compared to what I saw looking for Legionary or a Centurion print.
Yeah, I do get a sense that it is a bit higher in general. So, for example, for every 50 box turn in, I expect to get, somewhere between 1 to 4 blueprints, kind of ballpark. So, percentage-wise, I think that's pretty good.
Yep.
The downside, however, is you're talking about, fighting 28 million power ships, which you can only do with a single crew. You have to constantly repair your ship. So personally, I do it with the jellyfish, and because it's cheaper to repair.
Yep.
And at about 9 million power, I'm able to get 7 or 8 kills per hull. So it's a lot of grinding.
Okay, because so my jelly is at 6.3 million roughly, and I can get about 4 kills per run. But every 2 runs, I'll get a print or 2.
Yeah, it sounds
roughly.
like my rate, at least over, several thousand boxes, is not that high. I would still put it at roughly, it's definitely under 5%, but it may be around 5% overall for kills.
So yeah, and it might scale per level. I agree with you, but it's interesting that you've found that the kind of faction homeworld places are the best place to grind for, if you have a ship that can kill them in a shot or 2. That seems like a good place to stack up some prints.
Because you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone, right? So, I'm getting blueprints. So, for example, I have about half the blueprints for the tier 1, or the grade 4 uncommon warship, the Katinga, because I'm killing Klingies. And I have half the blueprints for the Bachor, for their faction miner. And I have, 75 blueprints, but it takes 350 to make the whatever the hell their rare is. I forget what it's called.
Yeah. So
yeah,
you
whatever that
blueprints now, because of your faction rep, are you able to buy the blueprints in the store with faction credits too? And if so, what are you looking at for cost-wise for faction credits?
So yes. So for example, my Kelvin and the Romulan Federation's miners, I bought those directly with faction credits. The faction credits are pretty standard. So, for example, for all the, Hydra takes 150 and Kelvin takes 150 blueprints. And your blueprints are about 1,300 faction credit per. So that's fairly standard.
Yeah, that's actually very comparable to the cost for like a D4 Enterprise or Augur, which you're looking at about 1,200 credits per blueprint.
Right, but those that require slightly less blueprints at 120.
Sure.
And they're very easy to get if you're a higher level, just through doing armadas. So, for example, I have 3 Enterprises, D4s, Augurs, and Jellies. And that's all from armadas.
Wow. Now, how is your feeling about armadas? Because at least for me personally, and I can't speak for everybody on my server, impressed by armadas. Now, are you enjoying armadas, or do you wish they could have did something different?
Initially, I was okay with it. I think that for a high 30, mid 30 to high 30, maybe low 40, they may have some benefit. For example, all the turn-ins, I really only exclusively have used those for some of the random events where you obviously get significant, like the domination events, you get significant bonus for tiering up ships. So I'll build a second jelly or a third jelly and tier it up because that helps my alliance. But I'm not using it. I mean, I don't have any function for it. So that being the payout, it really loses any benefit after the low 40s. I still run a lot of them for my alliance because a lot of my alliance players get benefit from it. But me personally, it doesn't do a dang thing for. And the turn-ins are a bit backwards, where you can't turn in your epics forever. We have
Sure.
I have hundreds of thousands of epic credits I can't turn in until we have the actual Armada event where you get the free ones.
Yeah. So Inch, I'm going to shift topics a little bit from kind of what we talked about before. But your alliance with Nona,
Correct.
right? The No Salt group. It's unusual when you compare it to from your server, which is server 34, to server 22. We don't have a group of the kind of highest power players all in one group at one time. What drew that group together that you didn't see before, right? Early on in your in the gameplay, right?
Correct.
That Nona didn't exist.
Correct. So I've been
ago,
in two alliances the entire time that I played. I was in a previous alliance that was basically a top 2 alliance, and I was one of the higher levels. And throughout playing, a handful of times our alliance had been at war with the other top alliance, and there was back and forth. The other top power players in the other alliance and I had frequently talked behind the scenes, and there was a lot of poking and prodding from some of the leadership that was of lower level, and many of us didn't really agree with what they were doing and how they were basically trying to force the game, and being the people they always called on saying, hey, we want you to go blow somebody up, come here, you're the muscle or whatever. So myself and half a dozen other high-level players broke off, and I started this alliance with them as Commodores. And over the successive couple of months, we've just had a draw of people. And because we started with higher-level players, it's become basically the most active alliance on the server. So when we have those alliance-wide events, and you look and see who participated in your alliance, we're currently at 75 out of those members. If we don't have 71 or 72 that participated, that's unusual. So it's worked out well.
Yeah. So I reached out to Officer Baudry when I first joined the server you're on. And that I'm on as well, and said, hey, I'm because you guys were active, and this goes back 4 or 5 months. Like, hey, I'm new to the server. Who do I join? And he indicated you weren't the right group because I wasn't a high enough level yet, early, and he recommended an alliance that I join. And it's worked out well, right? I'll just tell you that Men Are From Mars, Crash, that group is absolutely excellent, right? And when you look at what Stink has done, or Stinkhund, and
I agree,
really good group of players. But what's it take to get to the level where you have level 49 players, level 46 players, level 43 players, all in one alliance? And what do you do, right, when you have a group of players that can't hit lower level players, right? You're sort of in this limbo of, I can't hit below 27 or I can't hit below 29.
I can't hit below 32.
What do you guys do?
So we do have players. We very arbitrarily chose level 28 as our requirement for joining, at least for consideration. So we have some of those players that are lower and they can hit lower down. To be honest, one of our goals in forming a higher level overall alliance was to keep people's kind of play more in sync. So, for example, when we started, killing the 66 million power epic armadas was, harder. Now, and that was one of our goals. It's like we want to be able to field a team that we can one-shot the epic 66s. That was something that was there at the time. Everybody had just gotten their jellies. That was kind of where we were then. Well, now we have enough players that are, powerful enough that, for example, I can run, any of the rares or any of the level 36 epics, and I don't care who joins, we're going to win it. So other players get that benefit, so.
But what do you do? I mean, are you guys the?
Sure.
And I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. Are you becoming the Galaxy ROE /mining / Armada police, or are you guys just doing what you do and you're not worried about what others do?
One thing that was kind of unique on our server was some members from one of the, I would call it mid-level alliances, came together and formed a Discord for the entire server, invited the Admiral and 2 Commodores from the top 100 alliances to basically have a big old round table about what constitutes ROE. So as a server, we generally have agreed on what ROE is, and from time to time we adjust that. So more recently, we're currently voting on an addition that places ships that are of an alliance in a zone where they are forming an armada are protected under ROE, with the exception of if there is simultaneous raiding of a base by that alliance in that system. So it's kind of unique. I don't know of a lot of servers that have that setup. There may be. I'm just not aware of it.
All right.
But we're just a single voice in that. We don't run things. I'm not the police. Don't really care.
So, Inch, now this is where I got to ask questions, because on server 22, I'm number 1 in power destroyed. Potato's number 2. What are your? I'm sitting around 640 million in power destroyed at a level 33. I'm totally anti ROE. I hate the thought of it. I hate everything about it. Now, for somebody who's so heavily invested in this game like you are, do you find any issues that other people are able to dictate your play style and tell you that you have to play by who are not you?
I think the biggest issue is that the game mechanics are not very good. And when I say that, so for example, we've already referenced that, I have some miners that are 1.5 or 2 million quote unquote power. A 1.1 million warship can easily one-shot the miner. I think that's broken. I think if I have, as a level 49 player with a mid-level G4 miner, that miner should be pretty freaking sturdy, right? It should have some ability to fight back. It should have some ability to, if there's a game mechanic of it's attacked, but it fought off the attacker, it automatically returns to base. I don't care what it is, but I view those lack of appropriate mechanics as an ability for players to literally, they do change your gameplay. So if your miners are always open to attack and they have no way to defend themselves, and they have no way of not only defend but fight back or have some mechanic of escape or whatever it is, those players can adversely affect your gaming experience. So
now, let me ask you a question though. Do you get bored with the game though? And if you had a player on your server that didn't follow any sort of ROE, very similar to how I play on server 22, would you feel that would add another layer, another dynamic, or at least give you somebody to focus a little bit of your alliance's time and effort on and add a little bit of an element, maybe add some content to you, or do you just totally don't see that at all?
I mean, if there was some benefit, so for example, if PvP boxes meant something, okay. But for example, if that were a possibility, then might it add a layer? Maybe. But for me, literally, it's only a nuisance. I gain nothing by killing a ship. I haven't hit a miner in, I don't know, 6-8 months. I don't view that as any benefit to progression. And obviously, one of my focuses is on progression of the games, getting the new ships. I'm definitely more of a PvE oriented player approach to this game. Although I'm very heavily into PvP games in the past, like I played a lot of Rust, and I'm very much used to Salt, but hence the name of my alliance of No Salt.
Now, have you ever had just a inkling where you just want to go out and clear every system and just play the game however you wanted and no one could stop you? Or have you never even had that inkling at all in all the time you've played this game?
I don't know what the benefit would be. Watching, my ship go through and clear a bunch of ships, just like I don't make it a point to walk outside and step on an anthill. I'm not 10 anymore, and I don't get any pleasure out of it. So I don't see any personal benefit to me. It doesn't help me in gameplay. I don't get any personal satisfaction from it. So that's just the way I play the game.
No, and I understand that side of it too. For me personally, when I go out and clear, I do it for the social aspect of it. I do it because for you who has a 10 million Kelvin, your ships are very powerful. So there's not a lot of people that could kind of stop you. But in my sense, I have very weak ships, and I've purposely kept my ships down and not done upgrades so people will chase me. I enjoy the aspect of this game where I'm constantly having to watch all my ships. I can never just leave a miner out. I can never just warp a warship into a system and have no one hit it. So for me, I grew to a point where the game started being boring. And the only way I was able to keep the game from being boring was to add a content for myself, which was to be hunted. So that's where I come from. So yeah, is it fun to go through and clear a system and watch, my board is hit a non-boy? No, but what it is fun is constantly checking all the ports where people are warping their ships in and out and waiting for a Kelvin or a higher powered ship to come in and come after me, and have people hitting my station and having people wait for me when I warp back to my station. Like, all these things have added a element of, or a dynamic within our server 22, which I have found very entertaining and very exciting. So, but I definitely understand your side of it too.
Yeah, everybody can get out of the game what they want. I personally think, again, that game planning could have been a bit better to have essentially PvP and PvE style servers with different forced game mechanics. But again, I think it could also be balanced under the current combat mechanics a little bit better, where a warship should not 100% trump a survey ship every single time. And it does. There's nothing that can't kill even max tier G4 surveys. Any reasonable combat ship can easily one-shot it. If those mechanics were changed.
Well, yeah, I mean, it all depends on the tiers. So I've had, I've been raiding and sending ships back and forth, and we're talking about G3 miners here, right? So Antares, Cavort, Valkus, where somebody will come in with a Mayflower, and it'll bounce off the Antares, a maxed Antares, to be fair, and a Mayflower will bounce off it and get killed, but The Antares, which should be significantly stronger compared to that, it takes a lot of damage, right? I mean, it's on its last legs when it drags itself back into port. So I think your point is valid that you have these survey ships that are pretty strong, right? They're 1 million plus in power on the G3 stuff, and a tier 1 or a first level faction attack ship can easily beat them. If they're maxed out, they can definitely beat them. But if they're not maxed out, there's kind of this struggle. But either way, that faction ship, that faction miner, takes a pretty significant amount of damage and repair time and cost off of one hit. It might make it back to port, and it may not lose much if it gets killed. On the other hand, there is a little bit of a dichotomy between attack ships versus survey ships and their power and what they should be able to do.
Why do we have a protected limit of cargo? What is the purpose of that? If it's such a small amount compared to the size of cargo, if the goal is that should be about what you should mine before you should be forced back, and they need more of a range to allow you to effectively raid, I mean, that's at least the way that I kind of understand it, or can at least explain it. But in the same token, then you have, other facets like what the hell is the point of the Botany Bay and mining augment space? That is a pure grindy POS, almost a side mission of the whole game, but it's basically required if you want to get those officers. So you have to do it. And that was before the expansion. One of the areas, like, for example, that took you the, 12, 13, 14 minutes to get to mine, and you go mine for 10 minutes and you've got your OPL because the mining is so quick with it. And then what benefit is somebody getting from killing that Botany Bay for what essentially is 8 minutes of mining data, that much loot, so to speak, but it took you 20 minutes just to get the damn thing there and, set it and cycle a node once and whatever. So I view that as salt generation, so to speak. Somebody's doing it just to hit you.
Yeah. I agree that there's a point of what's the benefit of hitting a miner, right? Whatever flavor it is, but especially when it comes to data miners, you mine so fast that when somebody hits you there and they don't have the cargo capacity to take all of what you've accumulated, what did they really gain out of a 15-minute ride or a 12-minute ride?
I use my Horizon as an attack ship in augment space because I do have a Botany Bay and it's only tier 1. And I've almost maxed out my augment reputation just by hitting over protection. But that's because I enjoy that aspect of it. And I just enjoy blowing stuff up. Yeah.
Well, I get that stuff, Johnny. I would definitely argue that is a rare breed action to take. The vast majority of people that are killing miners, for example, in augment space, are doing so with some, POS, tier grade 1, 2, attack ship that has 20,000 cargo capacity, and that's it. Yeah. And they kill your Botany Bay that has 400,000 data.
Yeah,
I mean, it's that's the vast majority of people.
No, they're doing it to be antagonistic versus some outcome that they actually want to get out of it. Yeah. They just want to be.
That's why, like I said, I use my Horizon augment space like a battleship because of that cargo capacity. But to kind of get closer to wrapping stuff up, we're going to actually hit over the hour mark. But I think a question a lot of people probably have on their minds right now, and I know I definitely do for you and Chiz, obviously there is no end game to Star Trek Fleet Command, right? Obviously, the developers could always produce more. They could add missions. They could, if they wanted, add more levels. But as we stand right now today, if you were going to have the hypothetical argument of what the end game would entail, it would be impossible to have that conversation without talking about reaching level 50. Now, do you see that as a thing that's going to happen where par steel or titanium or dilithium, things that have been such a pain point for you for so long for op upgrades, are you going to hit that level at level 50 where par steel becomes irrelevant?
Well, if there is no level after 50, then of course, as soon as you upgrade your last, base aspect up to 50, then I don't need par steel anymore. That one would totally go away because par steel is obviously what it gives you base upgrades. Will I need titanium anymore? Well, I still need it to repair my ships, and to upgrade the ships, and same thing with dilly for your research. At some point, yeah, we'll complete all the research. So if you call it end game just to be at that level, is there still more to do? I think there is. I spent a good long time at level 39, still enjoying the game and still enjoying facets. But personally, under the current gameplay, I don't see as much quote unquote end game at level 50 because, for example, when I was 39, raiding was great. Still enjoyed it a lot. Figured I'd probably use the mats at some point regardless, and that was something to do. At 49, I don't see myself raid. If I get to 50, I'm not going to raid. I don't have any point to. I don't care. It's a number on a scoreboard. I don't care about the scoreboard. So personally for me, it becomes much more helping the other people in my alliance, doing things to help them out, doing the rep grinding, which is basically what I'm doing here anyway at this point. I would like to see some other opportunities for either some mission style play or additional, even just make it PvE at the higher levels. Like I said, in the deep space 45 and above zones, they haven't even programmed them out with friggin' hostiles to some degree. So there's not a lot of thought process that's gone into what to do at a higher level. But there's really no rate limiting factor for doing the missions. For example, I finished the level 50 combat mission not too long ago. Was not easy, don't get me wrong. Yellow ships are a lot harder to kill than red ships. So killing a level 10 or 10 million power yellow ship, that was hard. I had to use 4 attack ships, attack in rapid succession, choose different crews. So those kind of things would be nice to see, and you could do that even at an end game level. But it would require more programming on Scopely's point, which I don't see them doing. They're more focused on the monetization of the game, which I understand from a business perspective. But if you are able to switch out crews instantaneously, here's my PMC crew, I have it on a tab. I can switch up my crews quickly, move into attack ship formation. Now, instead of running 4 miners and 2 attack ships, I now run 6. That's really time intensive currently, but if it were faster, it would make it more entertaining to go out and run some of the random higher level missions that do require, actual thinking on how to kill things.
So I got a question for you, and that is, why 49, and why push to 50 faster than anyone else? Like, what really motivated you to be the guy to hit 49
a couple of different things. The first thing
the rest
is that, to be honest, the packs that you buy get better. So if you buy a pack of one of the $100 packs at level 40, the pack that I buy at level 49 is going to have 3 times the stuff in it. So when I'm dealing with tiering up, these new faction ships, am I going to sit there at level 41 and try to start, or 42 and try to start upgrading my Kelvin when it actually is going to cost me more than if I went to 49. So it was difficult to get up to, once you hit 46, then going 47, 8, 9 goes actually, interestingly enough, quite quickly. But that's also on the flip side why 49 to 50 is so painful, because you now need to upgrade everything in your base to 49 in order to promote. But to be honest, it very simply is, it makes the packs better when your base is better. So
if I took you back in time, you're level 15 or you're level 18 or 28, what's the best advice on free to play, pay to play, and what's most important to do in the game for all the players level 28 or below? What would be your best?
Simple. So I would put it into three
advice,
categories.
And you got as much time as you want
free to
on
pay,
that topic.
Free to play, you have pay to play, and you have pay to win. So you really have to decide initially what category you're going to be in. If you're going to be free to play, then I think you should be very even in the way that you level. You should not only level up your base. You should not only level up your ships. I would recommend keeping things pretty even and leveling up consistently in that fashion. If you're going to be pay to play, so, hey, I don't mind, every now and then, buying a pack here and there kind of thing, then I would recommend getting up to a level where, like 28-ish, more rapidly, and then build your ships back up and your research back up to a certain degree, just so that you can now experience more of the mid-level type gameplay. That's the G3 miners and things like that. For those players that want to be pay to win, to be quite honest, your best bang for your buck is to get higher level more quickly, and that is your sole focus. I don't care if you get to level 48 and only still have a Mayflower. You're still going to have an easier time getting ships and doing things, if you're going to buy a number of packs. So yes, you just get more bang for the buck.
Yep. Yeah, no question about it that my opinion personally, up to this point in my own gameplay, is if I had spent no money at all until I was level 28, I would have made much more progress for the dollar, for sure. And then beyond that, if I had spent no money until I was level 38, I would have, for the same amount of money, made much more progression at that point. So I, as much as maybe Scopely wouldn't want to hear it, don't spend money till you get to a high level. It's worth going slow. Get to the highest level you can get before you spend any money at all.
Yep. You do get more bang for your buck.
And then the money you spend
becomes for all those players
much
that
more
are lower
effective.
level out there, that if you intend to progress beyond level, 39, 40, you will pay for it. You have to pay money. There is no question. You can't mine it. You can't raid it. You're either buying it. It's either Amex or not.
Yeah, I would say, there's a handful of players out there that are level 28 and a little bit over. Probably the 28 range is the right place where they have, since the game began, have spent $0. But I would say anybody who's at level 35 or above, it's almost impossible they've spent $0. It might be that there's a rare player out there who's done it, but I would suspect,
unless the
really
really
right now,
good raiders,
you
can
money.
make it to the mid 30s,
right? There's no way
around dime. But you had to be really dedicated to raiding. But beyond that, it's just a requirement.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't think that it's Scopely trying to artificially slow down progression. I really think that it's relatively poorly thought out. That's why, for example, on the private Scopely Discord server, there's a lot of revolt from the players who are considered whales because of these ridiculous repair costs and for your Kelvin and your Newton and whatever. It's like, hey, if I'm paying $1 billion RSS to repair something, like I said before, I can't raid anymore. There's no point. So I hope to see some change. I'm optimistic, but currently I still play the game not because that I'm looking for the next level or I'm looking for the next this or that. It's a lot of it is just I like the guys in my alliance, to be quite honest.
Well, what do you enjoy best about the game? What's your kind of what gets you? What makes you come in and log in every day?
It's the people. It's definitely not the gameplay. It's definitely not the bugs. It's not sitting in combat for 2 minutes because I can't click somebody else in order to get it out. They have terrible version control. So it's not that. It's the community. And I enjoy that.
And I agree with you too. Me and you have very different mindsets when it comes to gameplay and, certain things like that. But we're both doing this for the community, even though like I said, our gameplay is very different. Mm-hmm. And that's why we're doing this podcast too. And for all those people out there listening on either server 34, server 22, or any of the other servers, we're doing this because we want everyone to grow. And you got to grow at your pace, and you have to take out of this game what's enjoyable for you. Don't ever let this game not be enjoyable. And if that means adding a little bit to more of the community aspect, definitely do that. And if you have any questions for Inch, feel free to drop them in the comments. We'll try. I think we'll definitely try to get you on again in a future podcast. This was one of probably the most insightful conversation I've ever had when it came to, what to expect at higher levels. And, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this, not just for me and AZ Potato, but doing this for everyone.
It's my pleasure entirely. Like everybody else, I seem to have a little bit more time on my hands, so I hope it was entertaining for people, and I'm very open to questions as well.
Yeah. So Inch, just what's your we talked to you for an hour, a little over an hour. What's your kind of closing theme? What do you want people to get out of us talking to you? From this
get some
conversation,
realistic expectations of what they get out of this game and what's going to be expected from it. I think people can have just as enjoyable a gaming experience, be it level 22 or level 42, if you temper what your expectations are with reality. So if you enjoy going and blowing up ships, that's your prerogative. You're going to have people that disagree with you. If you enjoy some of the, hey, I can go one-shot this 39 Armada by myself because I've done that. It's kind of entertaining. I mean, I kind of get a kick out of it. It's just, we've done some random armadas where we've only attacked with survey ships. It's like, that's just kind of fun. I mean, for whatever reason, I've got a kick out of some of those aspects of the game. But for me personally, it's the community. Everybody needs to decide for themselves what part they want to enjoy. And if you're level 22, but you're the best level 22 out there, you should be able to get equally as much enjoyment regardless of what the stupid number is next to your name.
Well said, man. Well said.
That well said. Hey, Johnny, what about you? What you've had this conversation with Inchoate and the first time you met him. What's your takeaway, or what do you hope people get out of this podcast?
Talking to him definitely shows
our conversation with him.
Two sides to every coin, right? I enjoy the conversation because of what to me feels very polar opposite to our gameplay. and understanding sometimes a little bit better and being more open-minded to other players' game styles. And, just the fact that he's taken the time out of his day and really to help educate a lot of us on all this stuff. And, if maybe, I doubt it, but if I could encourage him to go out and do a little bit of PvP action, I think I would have been successful with this. Because, man, hey, if I had your ships, I'd do some damage.
I'll tell you, I'll leave on this point. So my version of what you're talking about with the PvP has come from the few times that my alliance, be it this one or previous one, has actually warred with another one. And I will tell you, I very much enjoyed steamrolling through an armada trying to form and killing half a dozen or 7 of enemy ships. And that's when I was still locked at 39. So those experiences I have enjoyed, but in my opinion, those were mutually agreed upon warring quote unquote scenarios, which I think is the difference between my mindset and yours.
Sure. But when
It's all about the spirit of the game, right? And what we're doing to each other, and the other side understanding what we're doing, and it's all for fun.
Never it's
not
game. And I hope everyone
a
listening
personal
at home,
thing ever.
if they take one thing out of any of our podcasts or this podcast or anything, is that it's a game, and have fun, play the game how you want to play it, and just take as much out of this podcast and the game and your game style and your gameplay and make it enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Inchoate, really sincere thank you for taking your time. I know it took us a while to put this together, to coordinate the time, but greatly appreciate your insight and gave me and Johnny a lot to think about on our server.
It's my pleasure, guys. Thank you for
now I'm just more scared of you on the other
Happy
server
hunting
as well.
Well, I'm Johnny Chainsaw, AZ Petito. A very special thank
you.
You
as well, sir. Thank you.
Off. Stay safe out there.